Have you ever faced a situation where things didn't go as planned? A missed opportunity, an unexpected delay, or even a sudden change in direction? What if I told you that those moments were not random, but divine protection? Right now, at this very moment, God is watching over you. You may not see it, but He is working behind the scenes, shielding you from harm, fighting battles on your behalf, and setting you up for something greater. Many times we question why things happen the way they do, but if we could see from God's perspective, we'd realize that His protection is not just in what He gives us, but also in what He withholds. Stay with me, because by the end of this message you'll understand how God is protecting you right now in ways you never imagined. Even when you don't feel it, God's protection is always present. Life can be unpredictable, filled with challenges. There are moments when you might feel vulnerable, exposed to the troubles surrounding you. But the truth is, God's protection is not limited to what you can see with your eyes. His hand is constantly guarding you, even in ways you may never realize. Think about the times when things didn't go the way you expected. Maybe you were delayed on your way to work, only to later find out there was a major accident on that same route. What seemed like an inconvenience was actually divine protection. God doesn't always announce His work with a loud voice. More often than not, His protection comes in quiet, unseen ways. You don't always recognize it in the moment, but later, when you reflect on certain situations, you realize how His hand was guiding and shielding you. Consider the story of someone who missed a flight, frustrated by the delay, only to later discover that the plane they were supposed to be on had experienced a serious emergency. At first it felt like a setback, but in reality it was God's way of keeping them safe. This isn't just coincidence. This is divine protection at work. And it's happening in your life right now, even if you can't see it. Sometimes the things God protects you from are dangers you are completely unaware of. You may not know about the car accident you avoided, the illness you never contracted, or the harmful relationship He removed from your life. In these moments, it's easy to question why things didn't work out the way you wanted. You might feel disappointed when a door closes, but what if that closed door was saving you from future pain? God knows what lies ahead, and His protection extends beyond your present understanding. There are countless unseen battles being fought on your behalf. You may not realize it, but there are forces of darkness that seek to harm and derail you. Yet God's protection surrounds you like a shield. His angels are constantly at work, guarding your steps and keeping you safe from harm. Scripture reminds us that He will command His angels concerning you to guard you in all your ways. This means that wherever you go, whatever you face, you are never alone. Even in times of hardship, when you feel overwhelmed by life's burdens, God's protective presence is still there. When you walk through difficulties, He is the one holding you up, ensuring that you are not consumed by the trials you face. You may not see the full picture, but trust that He is working behind the scenes. What the enemy means for harm, God is already turning for your good. Think about how many times you worried about something that never even happened. Those anxieties that kept you up at night, what if God had already taken care of them before they reached you? How many unseen dangers has He shielded you from without your knowledge? The truth is, His protection covers you in ways beyond human comprehension. When you live with the awareness of God's unseen protection, you develop a deep sense of peace. You no longer need to live in constant fear of what might happen. Instead, you trust that God is always ahead of you, making a way and ensuring your safety. Every delay, every detour, every closed door, it all serves a greater purpose. You might be facing a difficult season right now, wondering why certain prayers seem unanswered. Sometimes, the very thing you are asking for could lead to harm if given too soon. God's timing is perfect because He sees the beginning and the end, He knows what is best for you and will never allow anything to touch your life unless he can use it for your good. Think of it this way: when a parent sees their child running toward danger, they don't wait to explain why they need to stop. They intervene immediately because they understand the risk. In the same way, God is always protecting you from things you can't yet understand. What feels like rejection may be His redirection. What seems like a delay might be His divine intervention. The beauty of God's protection is that it is constant and unchanging. Whether you are aware of it or not, He is always working to keep you safe. And the more you trust in His protection, the more peace you experience. You don't need to see every detail to believe that He is covering you. Faith means trusting that He is working for your good, even when you don't understand how. So the next time things don't go as planned, pause and consider the possibility that God is protecting you from something unseen. What you view as a disappointment might be His divine rescue. Every day, in ways both big and small, He is watching over you, shielding you from harm, and guiding you toward His best. Right now, even as you hear these words, God's protection is surrounding you. You are not exposed, you are not alone, and you are certainly not forgotten. His unseen hand is holding you, keeping you safe, and leading you to a future filled with hope and security. All you need to do is trust that He is with you, always. What if the delays in your life weren't obstacles but divine protection? What if the things you thought were setbacks were actually God's way of keeping you safe? So often, we become frustrated when things don't happen according to our timeline. We pray for open doors, quick answers, and immediate results, but when things take longer than expected, we start to question. We wonder if God has forgotten about us. But what if His delay is actually His mercy? What if He is protecting you from something you can't see? Imagine rushing to get somewhere only to experience a delay, a missed flight, a traffic jam, or a last-minute change of plans. In the moment it's frustrating. You may feel like it's an attack, a failure, or even bad luck. But later you might hear about a terrible accident on that very road, or you might realize that if you had left earlier, you would have walked into a situation that could have harmed you. That delay was not a mistake. It was God's protection in action. God sees what you cannot see. He knows the future. He knows where every path leads. Sometimes He delays you because He is keeping you from something dangerous. Sometimes He is positioning you for something better. If He had allowed you to get what you wanted at the exact moment you wanted it, you may have missed something greater He had planned. Think about how many times in your life you prayed for something, only to realize later that it wouldn't have been good for you. Maybe you asked God for a certain job, but you didn't get it. At the time, you were disappointed, but months or years later, you found out that the company collapsed, or that the position you wanted would have taken you in a completely different direction from the purpose God had for your life. That rejection was actually protection. Or maybe there was a relationship that you thought was meant for you. You prayed, you hoped, and you gave it your all, but things didn't work out. You felt broken, thinking that God had ignored your prayers, but later you saw the truth. You realized that person was not who you thought they were. Had you stayed in that relationship, it could have led to heartbreak, pain, or even destruction. The delay, the rejection, and the unanswered prayers were all part of God's plan to protect you. The story of Joseph in the Bible is a powerful example of divine delays. Joseph had dreams of greatness, but instead of immediate success, he faced betrayal, slavery, and imprisonment. From the outside, it looked like his life was full of setbacks, but in reality, every delay was positioning him for something greater. Had he not been sold into slavery, he wouldn't have ended up in Egypt. Had he not been falsely accused, he wouldn't have been in prison where he met the cupbearer. Had he not been in prison, he wouldn't have been presented before Pharaoh. And had he not stood before Pharaoh, he wouldn't have been promoted to the second in command of all Egypt. What seemed like delays were actually divine appointments. Joseph's story teaches us that even when things seem to be going wrong, God is still in control. He is always working behind the scenes. The delays in your life are not signs of His absence. They are signs of His protection. Sometimes we get so caught up in our own plans that we rush ahead of God. We want things now. We want answers immediately. But God operates on a different timeline. He is never late, but He is also never in a hurry. He works according to His perfect timing because He knows what is best for us. When we try to force things before the right time, we can end up in situations that we were never meant to be in. Have you ever looked back at a time in your life when you were in a rush to make something happen, only to realize later that you weren't ready? Maybe you wanted a certain position, but you didn't yet have the skills or the maturity to handle it. Maybe you wanted to be in a relationship, but you still had healing to do. Maybe you wanted a breakthrough, but you weren't spiritually prepared for the responsibility that came with it. God doesn't just protect you from external dangers. He also protects you from moving too soon. If something is taking longer than you expected, don't lose faith. Just because you don't see progress doesn't mean God isn't working. In fact, delays are often a sign that He is preparing something greater. You may not understand it now, but trust that God's timing is perfect. What He has for you will not pass you by. When the time is right, He will open the door, and when He does, you will see why He made you wait. Right now, you might be in a season where things feel slow. You've been praying, you've been waiting, and you're wondering when things will change. But instead of asking, why is this taking so long? Start asking, what is God protecting me from? What is He preparing me for? Your delays are not denials. They are a sign that God cares about you too much to give you something at the wrong time. He is keeping you safe. He is making sure that when your blessing comes, you are ready to receive it. So don't fight against the delay, embrace it. Rest in the truth that He sees the full picture. He knows what He's doing. One day you will look back on this season and realize that every delay was part of His greater plan. You will see that the things you thought were setbacks were actually divine setups. You will understand that God's protection was over you all along. So trust Him. Trust that He is watching over you. Trust that every delay has a purpose. Trust that what seems like a setback is actually God working things out for your good. You are not forgotten. You are not being overlooked. You are being protected. And when the time is right, God will make everything fall into place, far better than you ever imagined. There are moments in life when you feel surrounded by difficulties. You may be facing opposition, betrayal, or even attacks from people you thought were on your side. It seems like the world is against you, and no matter what you do, you can't seem to escape the challenges that keep coming your way. In these moments, it's easy to feel abandoned, like you're fighting a battle alone. But what you don't realize is that God has placed a hedge of protection around you. There are forces working against you, but there is a greater power working for you. God is shielding you from things you don't even know about. There are attacks that were meant to reach you but never did because He blocked them. There were people who plotted against you, but their plans failed because God stopped them before they could act. He is always ahead of the enemy's schemes. You may never know how many times He has saved you from harm, how many unseen dangers He has kept you from, or how many times He has redirected your steps to keep you safe. Look at the story of Job. Satan wanted to attack him, but he couldn't because there was a hedge of protection around Job. It was only when God allowed a test that the enemy was able to touch him. That means, without God's permission, no attack can reach you. The enemy cannot break through the protection that God has set around you. When you belong to Him, when you walk in His will, you are covered. You are surrounded by divine security. Many times, you feel the pressure of the enemy's attacks. You sense opposition, discouragement, or resistance. But even in the midst of the battle, you have no idea how much worse it could have been if God hadn't been shielding you. That betrayal that hurt you, it could have destroyed you, but God gave you the strength to endure it. That sickness that came against you, it could have taken your life, but God intervened. That financial struggle, it could have ruined you, but God made a way. What the enemy meant for evil, God turned for good. The enemy's attacks will never have the final say over your life. When he tries to come against you, he will only get so far before God stops him. You may feel like the enemy is closing in, but God is always one step ahead. He will not allow you to be destroyed. Think about the times you were worried about something, but in the end, it never happened. You expected the worst, but somehow, things worked out. You lost a job, but then a better opportunity came. You thought a relationship ending would break you, but later you realized it was a blessing. That's because God was protecting you. He was closing doors that weren't meant for you and opening new ones that aligned with His plan. There are people who were planning to harm you, but God exposed them before they could carry out their plans. There were traps set for you, but God made sure you never fell into them. There were situations designed to bring you down, but God used them to lift you up. You didn't even realize it at the time, but He was fighting for you. He was shielding you from dangers you never saw. That's why it's important to trust Him, even when you don't understand what's happening. Sometimes you feel like things are falling apart, but in reality, God is rearranging things for your protection. That opportunity that slipped away, that relationship that didn't work out, that situation that seemed unfair. What if it was all part of His plan to shield you? What if what you saw as a loss was actually your deliverance? God is always working in the background. You may not see Him, but He is there. His angels are surrounding you, going before you, standing beside you. You are never alone. When you walk through difficulties, He is walking with you. When you face attacks, He is shielding you. When the enemy comes in like a flood, God raises a standard against him. You are not an easy target for the enemy. You are covered by the Almighty. No weapon formed against you will prosper. It may be formed, but it will not succeed. It may come against you, but it will not destroy you. The enemy may try to shake you, but he cannot break you because you are standing on the firm foundation of God's protection. There may be moments when you feel weak, but remember, you are not fighting alone. God is fighting for you. He is blocking the attacks that you can't see. He is turning the enemy's plans into nothing. He is frustrating the schemes that were set against you. Even when it feels like you are surrounded, you are actually surrounded by Him. One day you will look back and realize that what you thought was a difficult season was actually a season of divine protection. You will see how God's hand was over you the entire time. You will understand that every closed door, every delay, every hardship was not meant to harm you, but to shield you from something you couldn't see. So don't live in fear. Don't be anxious about what's ahead. Rest in the truth that you are covered. God is watching over you, shielding you, and making a way where there seems to be no way. Whatever is coming against you will not prevail, because God has already placed a hedge of protection around you. You are safe in His hands. There are times in life when you feel uncertain about what's happening around you. You look at your situation and wonder why certain things didn't work out the way you expected. Doors you prayed for remained closed, relationships you valued ended, and opportunities that seemed perfect slipped away. In those moments, you might feel frustrated, questioning why things didn't go the way you planned. But what if those closed doors were actually God's way of protecting you? What if the opportunities you thought were right for you would have led you into harm? God's protection often comes in ways we don't immediately recognize. We think of protection as being saved from visible danger, but sometimes God is protecting you by removing things from your life before they can cause damage. You may have wanted that job, but God saw that it would have drained you emotionally. You may have wanted that relationship to work, but God knew it would have broken your heart in ways you couldn't imagine. You may have wanted to stay in a certain place, but God had to move you to position you for something greater. When God removes something, it is not rejection, it is redirection. He is leading you toward His best, even when you can't see it yet. It's hard to accept at times because you only see what you're losing, but He sees what He is saving you from. That friendship that faded, it wasn't an accident. That business deal that fell apart, it wasn't a mistake. That plan that didn't come together, it wasn't a failure. It was divine protection. God is always working behind the scenes, ensuring that what enters your life aligns with His perfect will. Think about a child who doesn't understand why their parent won't let them play with something dangerous. The child cries, feeling like something precious is being taken away, but the parent knows they are protecting their child from harm. That's exactly how God works in our lives. We may cry over what we lost, but He knows that what we wanted was not for our good. Consider the story of Joseph in the Bible. He was betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery. He must have wondered why God allowed such pain, but if Joseph had never been betrayed, he would have never ended up in Egypt. If he had never gone to Egypt, he would have never become a ruler. What seemed like rejection was actually protection, leading him to his destiny. When you trust God, you learn to let go of the need to control every outcome. You understand that He sees the bigger picture. There are people who were removed from your life because their presence would have delayed your growth. There are doors that didn't open because walking through them would have taken you away from your purpose. You may not understand it now, but one day you will look back and see that every no was a blessing in disguise. Sometimes God allows difficulties to push you in the right direction. You may have lost a job, but what if God was redirecting you to a better career? You may have been forced to leave a place you were comfortable in, but what if God was moving you into an environment where you could thrive? What feels like loss is often divine protection in action. Trusting God's protection means surrendering your plans to Him. It means believing that even when things don't make sense, He is still in control. It means recognizing that rejection is not the end. It's a setup for something greater. If you could see what He is protecting you from, you would thank Him for every closed door, every delay, and every redirection. The enemy may try to convince you that you missed out, that you lost something valuable. But what if the truth is that God removed it to make room for something better? What if He is preparing something greater than you ever imagined? Instead of mourning what was lost, start expecting what's coming. Instead of looking at what didn't work out, start looking forward to what God is about to do. You are not being punished. You are being protected. Every setback is a setup for a greater comeback. Every detour is leading you to something better. Trust that God knows what He is doing, even when you don't understand, even when it hurts, even when it feels unfair. Trust Him. One day you will see that everything He removed was not a loss, but a rescue. So keep walking in faith. Keep believing that God is in control. Keep trusting that He is leading you to His best. You may not see it now, but He is always working, always protecting, and always guiding you toward His perfect plan. There are moments in life when everything seems to be falling apart. You feel like you're standing in the middle of a storm, with waves crashing all around you. The struggles seem endless, and the weight of the battle makes you feel like you can't take another step. You pray, you cry out to God, but instead of immediate relief, you find yourself still walking through the fire. It's in these moments that doubt creeps in. You start wondering, is God even with me? Does he see what I'm going through? But what if, in the middle of the storm, God is not only with you, but actively protecting you in ways you cannot see? God's protection does not always mean the absence of trouble. Sometimes it means he is strengthening you in the storm. He never promised a life free from struggles, but he did promise that he would never leave you. The very fact that you are still standing, despite everything you've faced, is proof of his protection. There were moments when the enemy wanted to destroy you, but God placed a shield around you. There were battles that should have taken you out, but God said, not this one. This one is mine to fight. Think about Daniel in the lion's den. God didn't stop Daniel from being thrown into the den, but he did shut the mouths of the lions. The trial still came, but so did the protection. The same thing happened with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were thrown into the fiery furnace, but instead of being consumed by the flames, they were met by the presence of God. He didn't keep them out of the fire, but he walked with them through it. And when they came out, they didn't even smell like smoke. The struggles you are facing right now are not a sign that God has abandoned you. In fact, they are evidence that he is covering you. Every time you thought you wouldn't make it, but you did, that was God. Every time you felt like giving up, but something inside you kept pushing forward, that was God. Every time the situation looked impossible, but somehow a way was made, that was God's protection. Often looks like endurance. He gives you the strength to keep going when you feel like stopping. He gives you peace in the middle of chaos. He gives you the wisdom to navigate challenges that should have overwhelmed you. You may not see him physically, but his presence is undeniable in the way he sustains you. If the enemy had his way, you wouldn't be here right now. You would have been defeated, broken, and destroyed, but God put a hedge around you. There were dangers you never even saw because he blocked them before they could reach you. There were situations meant to break you, but instead they built you. There were moments you thought were your end, but God turned them into new beginnings. The truth is, God knows the full story. He knows the end from the beginning. You see the battle in front of you, but he sees the victory that's coming. You see the storm, but he sees the rainbow on the other side. You see the struggle, but he sees the testimony that will come from it. If you could see what he is doing behind the scenes, you would not be afraid. You would not doubt. You would walk in confidence, knowing that you are covered, even when you don't feel it. Even now, in this very moment, God is protecting you. The enemy may be trying to attack your mind, but God is giving you the strength to resist. Fear may be trying to creep in, but God is surrounding you with his peace. The pressure may be intense, but God is holding you together. You are not alone in this. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. This season of your life is not the end. What you are going through right now will not destroy you. You will come out stronger. You will come out wiser. You will come out with a testimony that will encourage others. The very thing that was meant to break you is going to be the thing that proves God's faithfulness in your life. So do not give up. Do not lose heart. Do not let the storm convince you that God is not with you. His presence is not always in the loud, dramatic moments. Sometimes it's in the quiet strength that keeps you going. Sometimes it's in the peace that makes no sense. Sometimes it's in the small reminders that he is still in control. Look back over your life. Think about the times you thought you wouldn't make it, but you did. Think about the times when you were at your lowest, but somehow you rose again. That was not an accident. That was not luck. That was God's protection. And if he did it before, he will do it again. The battle may still be raging, but your victory is already written. The fire may still be burning, but you will not be consumed. The storm may still be roaring, but you will not sink. God is protecting you right now. You may not see it yet, but one day you will look back and realize that He was holding you the entire time. Stay strong. Keep the faith. Trust that He is working even in the middle of this storm. There are moments in life when we look back and realize that we were protected in ways we never understood at the time. The challenges we faced, the battles we fought, the doors that closed, and even the painful experiences we endured, all had a purpose beyond what we could see in that moment. God's protection is not always obvious, and many times it is hidden in what seems like disappointment, redirection, or even suffering. But later, when the dust settles, we come to understand that He was shielding us, guiding us, and preparing us for something greater. Think about the times when you prayed for something, but God didn't give it to you. Maybe you wanted a certain job, a relationship to work out, or a particular opportunity to come through, but instead the door remained shut. In the moment, it felt like rejection. It felt like you were being overlooked or forgotten. You may have questioned why God would allow you to go through such heartbreak or frustration, but then time passed, and you saw the bigger picture. You saw how that job would have led you into a toxic environment, how that relationship would have broken you, or how that opportunity would have taken you away from His greater plan. What once seemed like denial was actually divine protection. There are things God keeps from you, not because He wants to punish you, but because He loves you too much to give you something that would harm you. You see only the present, but He sees the future. You see the immediate desire, but He sees the long-term consequences. He knows the weight of the burdens you are not ready to carry. He knows the people who are not truly for you. He knows the paths that will lead you away from His purpose, and in His mercy, He blocks certain things from reaching you. He allows you to be disappointed for a moment, so that you can be protected for a lifetime. Think about Joseph in the Bible. He had a dream of greatness, but his journey to that dream was anything but smooth. He was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and falsely accused. To the outside world, it looked like he was suffering, like he was forgotten, like his life was falling apart. But in reality, God was positioning him. What seemed like rejection was actually redirection. If his brothers had never sold him, he would have never ended up in Egypt. If he had never been falsely accused, he would have never been placed in the position that led him to the palace. Every painful step was actually leading him closer to the fulfillment of the dream. Sometimes what you think is working against you is actually working for you. The delay you're experiencing is not a denial, it's a setup. The people who walked away from you were not meant to be part of your destiny. The opportunities that didn't work out were not meant for you. If God allowed something to leave your life, it's because it was not connected to your purpose. He does not remove things to hurt you. He removes them to protect you. When you understand this, you stop fighting against what God is doing. You stop trying to hold on to people and situations that He is trying to take away. You stop questioning why certain things didn't happen and start trusting that He knows what's best for you. You stop feeling like you are missing out and start believing that if it was meant for you, it would have stayed. This is why perspective is so important. If you only see things from your limited view, you will feel frustrated and discouraged. But when you see things from a divine perspective, you will realize that everything, every closed door, every heartbreak, every disappointment was actually a part of God's protection. You will understand that He was shielding you from things that could have destroyed you, even when you didn't see the danger. Maybe right now you are in a season where things don't make sense. You don't understand why certain things happened the way they did. You don't see how this could possibly be part of God's plan. But one day you will look back and see His fingerprints all over your life. You will see how He was protecting you when you thought He was ignoring you. You will see how He was guiding you when you thought you were lost. You will see how He was setting you up for something greater when you thought everything was falling apart. The enemy wants you to believe that because things didn't work out the way you wanted, God is not for you. He wants you to believe that you are being punished, that you are alone, that you are forgotten. But the truth is, you are deeply loved. You are divinely protected. You are in the hands of a God who knows what is best for you. And even when you don't understand His ways, you can trust His heart. So instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" ask, "God, what are you protecting me from?" Instead of dwelling on what you lost, focus on what you gained. Wisdom, strength, a clearer vision of your purpose. Instead of being bitter over what didn't happen, be grateful for what did. Because what God has for you is always better than what you thought you wanted. You may not see it now, but one day you will look back and realize that every no was actually a yes to something better. Every detour was actually a direct path to your destiny. Every painful moment was actually shaping you into the person you were meant to be. And through it all, God was protecting you, watching over you, guiding you, and leading you into His perfect plan.